那
Do you want to talk to him?
All right, so we'll start with the prayers. Just a second.
Sanji Chodon Toji Chomola Chanchu Bande Dani Kemsi Dagi Shishi Gibi Somuni Sanji Sho Sanji Chadam Sogi Charula Chanchu Badu Dani Kemsuchi Dagi Chishegi Sanji Jola Penshi Sanji Jubara Sho Sanji Chadam Sogi Charula Chanchu Badu Dani Kemsuchi Dagi Chishegi Sonunji Jola Penshi Sanji Jubara Sho 강기 도전이 보면 다와 동지 방비처럼 담비 준den제 고등제라 창제로 Good evening everyone. The cousin also denshi midas chuduk slowers la demashi denshi midas chuduk titan ani 동하르당 군중 거르다 숍 점로직 가서 쉬 심이 그러더라스라.
So Geshe started off in the previous session with looking at the 16 aspects of the Four Truths. So in teaching the Four Truths, each one of the truths has 4 aspects associated with it. And in the previous session, Geshe briefly covered the aspects associated with true suffering and true origins.
데르다 카징게 페나 동할라야 케주시 군중라야 케주시 동하게 케주시 송디 메타 동할동 다메세디 동하덴비 케주시티 데디게 가서다 케주셀티 조 아니 동할기 네룩도치 네당로디 and
So when we speak of these aspects of the 16 aspects of the Four Truths, we're looking at the features. So in the previous session, we've covered 4 features of true suffering, then 4 features of true origins. So for example, the features that true origin have are impermanence, misery, or in the nature of suffering, empty, and selfless. These 4 features, right? So, and when we say features, what we mean is that this is the way they are. This is what they are. This is their reality. So true suffering, the features, the reality is that they are impermanent, in the nature of suffering, empty, and selfless.
Kishimburis and the Kishimburastra. The any that the Kartingores Laundi, Dungardi, Tanganzu Musun there. He paid so travel Dungainanda, Musun Yoma Tupa, and it's true desagi. Dungalaya, Devonzen desagi, she, Kavanduji, Dungainanda, Kanji Kain, but the any Juvi Ranji changes. And
this is an important point. It is an important point because if you wonder, looking at these aspects of true suffering, for example, what do they teach us? Well, what they teach us is how we apprehend this strong sensation, the experience that we have. So we have this experience of true suffering, but rather than taking it to be suffering, we are mistaken with respect to it, and we hold that to be pleasure. We hold that to be happiness. So this is the way that we are mistaken with respect to it.
가서 다지 삼로 통초로디 조 차반두시 동안 사진 여행이 분분됐다고 그러지 뭐나 안 뒤따도 비길이야 지 따바 템보 소리지 아니 교험이 비기 아니 최 소리지 대신에 아니 디게 된다 인생 마음을 쉬어질이야 때문에 깔리게하고요 아니 노르샤스 ताबत टेम्पल जिंदे है तन नर्सस ताबत टेम्पल यो मारे किच गिव रांजी चेंज रेस मा दाम्बी की दांगा दी 아니 동 걸사 동하디 동된디 미탁바르 세티기 소 딘디 코고 거레스.
So then in looking at these features of, to begin with, true suffering, the first feature, the first aspect is impermanence. So we come to see that what is in actual fact suffering, we take that to be pleasurable, we take that to be happiness. So we make a mistake with respect to that, and that which is true suffering is in actual fact momentary. It changes from moment to moment. It is impermanent. So when you look at this aspect, you come to see that this is like an instruction for oneself. It is an instruction for oneself because what we take to be this true suffering, by and large, or the most important thing that we take to be as true suffering, is the contaminated, appropriated aggregate. So we hold on to this body, for example, the contaminated, appropriated aggregate, to be permanent, to be stable, to be unchanging. And the things that we work on day and night, with putting so much effort into whatever we do, is in order to take care of something that we hold on to be permanent, unchanging, stable. But then when you look at this aspect of true suffering, this contaminated, appropriated aggregate, you come to see that it is not permanent, it is not stable. It's actually impermanent. It changes from moment to moment. There is no stability in it. There is no there is no degree of permanence to it. It is something that changes from moment to moment.
제 딘자 아니 디치그레다 니바들이야 동하와레스 라운데 메타 동할 독딘 동하와레스 펜나가즈타 아니 동하 라바 페나 아니 초 동하다버티 나주타 동하 임바디다 아니 믹세기 아니 쟁아가 마솜 땅한서 합코데 뇽데로 지그라스 단 규비 동하다 하드도 차버두지 동하 지금 아주 사진이와님 뭐 듣다 보려야 아주 지 대화를 좀 하도 동하 그란시 임바지 싸우님 소르고요 말아 디 아니 너르디 임바지 디 아니 개범해봤디 아니 동하랑레스 에 망모튼 냄부 나미기 소트 저지 차고레스 데 대완진데디 노르고레스 대와 싸우님 말레스 동아레스 저도 차고레스티.
So we say that what we refer to mainly when we speak of true suffering is the contaminated, appropriated aggregate, for example, this body. So the second aspect is misery, or in the nature of suffering. So this true suffering is in actual fact misery. It is in the nature of suffering. So then when we speak of suffering, there are different levels to suffering, right? So the cause level of suffering is a painful sensation, painful feeling of suffering. And all of us understand that, all of us know that. We know that based upon a personal experience, we have sensations that are painful. But there are other levels to suffering. Like, for example, the second type of suffering is called suffering of change. The third one is called pervasive suffering of conditionality. And we don't sense them at all as suffering. We actually take these types of suffering to be something that is pleasant, something that is pleasurable, right? So for us, suffering of change and pervasive suffering of conditionality is something that is solely happiness. So when you look at the second attribute of true suffering, and the attribute is in the nature of suffering, this is misery, you come to have that stark recognition, stark identification of the nature of this aggregate, which is in the nature of suffering. It is not at all pleasurable. It is not at all happiness. It is actually suffering. This is what you get when you look deeper into the second feature, the second attribute, which is in the nature of suffering.
제 데르다 답변은 아주 디 nanzu pumpu di any devi te mayimba ransing dewa mayimba di tanyamyon yorwas nanzu ya kar cheba ya lun de deya che to kar thap kar temba ya ko mandrik wajima to pa gyunkyang di ani ko tha mandrik wajima to ta diya ji mayon ya de kar res di ko 그 란신다 마스는 디 dumhar inza medibi ranjin jinza ani khole devi cha devi karsata kab yohya meba di tisha gorwas.
So, for example, when we look at this body, this aggregate, we can see that this aggregate is not a basis for happiness. It's in the nature of suffering. It is not pleasant. It is not pleasurable. It is in the nature of suffering. And we can see that based upon a personal experience. Like, for example, when you inspect that based upon your personal experience, you can see that whatever you do, whatever method you use, whatever you try to accomplish, there's always something that is not quite right. Nothing is perfectly aligned for us. Nothing is working in a perfect way in which everything is completely right. There's always something that is not quite right. And why is it? It is because this is in the nature of suffering. It is misery.
Je bena nganzogi subudi kole shashana guyu chi majir chi ko ani khala de se de shashana dur khor ani kanzam jila ya guyu tang modo ge cha re ta yimba ta sewu shure dos ti an ko devi ranshin jin ba na ya ko shasha wa na pigile ya desa jila ya jamsa jila ya bu zu shasha wa na ya ko jin de tu ko ya do ji yor de 자원님도 생각 수고 거부로다 쓰라 간지 수부들이야 지 독 소리 마다마이나 깔레티스 마테바이나 수부도 거부로다 쓰라
거부로다
거 껴껴로 라.
So you can look at examples of how this body is not something that is quite good or stable. It's actually something that goes from bad to worse, so it deteriorates in a sense that suppose that you let the body rest in a state of calm, or it is at ease. It is not moving. It is you don't have to do anything to provide it with food. You just kind of let it rest at ease. After some time, it cannot stay. It cannot remain in that state. Things change, and then that situation of ease goes from bad, it goes from bad to worse, right? So it deteriorates, and then you cannot remain without moving. You have to either change position and do something else because you cannot take it anymore. If the body was by nature pleasurable or happiness, it would mean that, or if that would be something that is genuine happiness, it would mean that when you provide it with something that is soft, right? So when you're at ease, resting upon something that is soft and comfortable, your happiness and pleasure should be always on the increase. It should always get better and better. If that would have been genuine happiness, authentic happiness. But we can see that this is not the case, because for the time being, something can be pleasant, it can be at ease, but then things go bad.
Terdenza kola yakbu kazus chebaina dur royal mado the yar royal major roch redos tanganzu meze kanza la kalekia sayan tonya goya che kalekia ondita mixa su di and lead the major roch chagora dindiji chebaina yoko and dur kyor kanzam jila nimachla ta nganzu da katre royach ro and so sam the katre royach the Ranshin Redos. These are the Ranshin Laya, Deva Mevadi, Devi Ranshin Mayimadi, and he Tonta, and a Sivu Chagores.
We can clearly see how this body is going from bad to worse. It's not improving, it's not getting better and better. As time goes by, it goes from bad to worse. and how much hard work we put into place throughout our life. We work hard in order to provide it with food, with shelter, and so forth. And yet, it's not that it's becoming better and better. It's going from bad to worse. And there will come a day, sometimes in the future, when we will have to be parted from this body. The mind will depart from the body. So when you look at it like that, you can come to see how this body is not by nature happiness. It's not by nature something that is pleasant.
Tirda ta kechu nipa dang sumba de shivekala ya tong dame se di ta zo di kechu ti kharten gore slaundi kechu ti ge tedawi duden di raun to meba duden di raun to meba di kechu dini tengores.
So we briefly recap the first two attributes or aspects of true suffering. Then we have the third and fourth attributes, which are the attribute of empty and selfless. So what do they tell us? They indicate to us that the aggregates, this true suffering, are not independent, right? So this true suffering is not independent. It does not exist under its own power.
Tinzata kechu tamani dang that any kechu niba digi zo korangi da kasata ngond dungaki ngond shi kechu tangbo metaba se di keji keji gyudro se di tawi ku ngond re de ne gyudro ya di rawan de mebe gyudro yo ba rawan de meba tichi undi ta kasata 다 신질이야 뜨고요 버디 아니 신을 뜨는 줘요 버디다 세우시지 된 거라서.
So then you look at these four aspects of true suffering, and you come to see that, for example, the second feature, being in the nature of suffering, indicates the nature of the aggregates. They are in the nature of suffering. The first attribute, you can also say that it refers to the nature of the aggregate, but what it also indicates to you is the first aggregate is impermanent, which means that it changes from moment to moment. It disintegrates from moment to moment, that this aggregate, this true suffering, is not independent, in that it is not under its own power, under its own control. It depends upon something else. So we can prove that because it disintegrates from moment to moment, it is impermanent, it changes from moment to moment, that it does not have its own control, it is dependent upon something else. Right, so this first aspect is indicating to us that it does not change independently. It doesn't change by its own power. It changes due to depending upon others.
Gyugen khandachile teni ani chongware gyurware tochi labaina ta gyude kenzu di ani ta kunjung se di jidan kazi ji shusara ta ba di thom da legoras.
It changes due to causes and conditions. It depends upon cause and conditions, and therefore it changes to moment. So in what way does it depend upon cause and conditions? What are they? Well, this is also something that we referred to in the previous session. So we spoke about true origins. So this aggregate changes from moment to moment, and this change comes to pass because it depends upon true origins.
Tadirida ani tatsu di gyu dunga gyu zu di chadamosu kazan shode tiri ta delaya 민 군종 세디 라 간신 동화 군 동화 참말로 텔레비전 중국 연자 아니 민 군종 세다 가지 지슈라다 디레스라
So the second truth is true suffering. And here we're looking at the cause for suffering. And the cause for suffering, the causes are anger, attachment, and ignorance. These are true origins. And we call them true origins because they are the origins of all the suffering that we experience.
다들이 당한주기 누구니 셰비 그거 쪼디 가르레스란 당한준 되든 주야기 체도 라 난준 데비 된 주야기 체도 아니 산기기 난줄이야 누구니 오제 나와인자 당한준 되든 쪼 가르레스다원디 대화들어와 동화 세들어와 당 되든 쪼 들어왔어 딘자 당한준 문대야 동화디 어느 셀기 요르베스 매바 소에 요르베스 라운디 다 매바 소에 요다 메기 케제디 아니 콘 종사기 규징 짜와디 카 레도 디 아니 세기 요다 메기 톨이야 아니 심죽 제거해야 돼 타고 란지 차고라 디지디기 아니 뎀바스ум바 고비 뎀바세든 고세디 동학기 규 군중 고비 고바디 아탄 고비 뎀바세디 디순고레스
So we spoke of true suffering and true origins, which are the main things that we use in our practice, in the sense that, first of all, when we ask ourselves, what are we seeking? What do we want? Well, we are introduced to true suffering and true origins because we are looking for happiness and we want to dispel our own suffering. So the question is, can suffering be eliminated? Can we dispel suffering? Can suffering be eliminated? In order to look into that, we need to ask ourselves, what is the cause, the root cause for suffering? If we're able to recognize the root cause of suffering and see the ability, the possibility of eliminating it, then we can accomplish what we want to eliminate suffering. So looking at the root cause of suffering, which is true origin, and whether it is possible to eliminate true origins, what we come to recognize is true cessation, the third truth. And true cessations are referring to cessations of true origins, and true origins are the causes of suffering.
어딜다 딘자 아니 다 동har기 규 군중 군중 세나무도 아니 차담 모습 디고 디 아니 매버서야지 요래 요 말에 세티 상들레온디 다 차담기 로디 로 비게 로 세마지레도 로 신줄로지레도 어쭈 디따야지 그러셨어.
And therefore, when we look at origins as the origins of suffering, these are the causes of sufferings. What we come to look at is anger, attachment, and ignorance. And the question is, can we eliminate anger, attachment, and ignorance? Is it possible, or is it impossible to eliminate anger, attachment, and ignorance? In order to look at that, we start to look at these states. For example, anger and attachment. Are anger and attachment valid cognitions? Are they valid? Or are they states of mind that are in error?
예, 다 lot 세마진 바이나 lot 든든 lot 세마진 바이나 다디 딩 고해요 말스 곧 로디 뎀바차고 말스 베낭한주 율 네루 뎀바디 가드이는 뎀바차데르마도 디 아니 교도에스 기요 말스 디난신기 lot 세마지나 lot 세마리 갑딘 무윤네수 갑딘 요바치 인디 아니 고해요 말스 다디 lot 세마 인다민디 아니 lot 세마 인다민디 그 전당이야 전당디 된던 tumbaji 된던 뎀바지 무윤네수지 레도 모두 어딜 따고 났다 로 디기 lodi re semayi mayindi lodi yulti damage rendum delta areas.
So we said that we need to look at anger and attachment and investigate whether there are valid cognitions or whether there are cognitions that are in error, erroneous. So are anger and attachment valid cognitions in a sense that are they factually concordant consciousnesses? Do they agree with the fact? And in order to investigate that, to see whether they agree with the fact, whether they are valid cognitions, what we need to look at is whether what they apprehend is true, right? This is the meaning of valid. The meaning of valid is to check whether it is true, whether it is in line with reality, whether it is the way that things exist. If something is true, if this is real, it will not change into something that is unreal. It is real. It is the truth. So then, when we look at valid cognition has has a certain basis to support it, and the basis is reality. So then, when we check whether a certain cognition is valid or not valid, what we need to look at is the thing that it apprehends and the way that it apprehends it. Whether what it apprehends in a particular way agrees with reality, whether it exists in that way. So basically, in order to determine whether a cognition is valid or not, we need to look at the object that it apprehends.
That dire tinza the chadam mosum kita zandang slaundi the zo di zaw di mariwat chagoras ra chadang ni zandang taya di ani zawa mariwa gi zandang ye chetu na ani chadang gi lo di ani zandang kasata zamba ani tending in the mindi chele lawu insares ra dichidi da zawa mariwa seti mariwa gi zandang khari yimbati ani taon digi mari bigin zinsul di yang zinsul di shigo das ra.
So then we're looking at anger, attachment, and ignorance, and we're trying to figure out whether there are valid cognitions or whether there are consciousnesses that are erroneous. So in order to look into that, what we need to investigate is the mode of apprehension of anger, attachment, and ignorance. What is the way that they apprehend their objects? The root of anger and attachment is ignorance, right? Just a second. The root of anger and attachment is ignorance. So when we look at the mode of apprehension, first of all, with respect to anger and attachment, we can easily assess whether they are factually concordant or not, whether they agree with reality, whether they are factually concordant or whether they're not factually concordant. With anger and attachment is easier. What we need to look at is ignorance. So what is the mode of apprehension of ignorance? In what way does ignorance apprehend its object? This is the mode of apprehension, the way that ignorance apprehends its object, right? This is something that we certainly need to know. What the mode of apprehension is of ignorance.
Reda mari bigin ni zandang la tawandi mari bas lavras ku min koral ya mari bas lawandi ani khar mari bas lavre seg that kharza that and theoda masn da yungor darwa.
So we speak of ignorance, and the way that ignorance is expressed in Tibetan is marikpa, right? So that's two syllables, ma and rik, or rikpa. So rikpa is knowledge, and ma is a negation of that. So the overall meaning of that is unknowingness, or not knowing. So what is not known? That's the question.
Re karmari bares laundi pigi yuki the zo nilu 유지 내루 유지 내당 유지 우유 내속이 요출디 디마리 바레스.
So what is not known here? Well, what is not known here is reality, which means the mode of abidance, the way that it is. This is what is not known or not understood here.
That di muyu nesuldi nelu de mariba zamase nelu dilaya shinjilo tachin. Ani zindingi dilaya mariba segores.
And here that unknowingness is not limited only to an absence of knowledge, to a lack of knowledge. It is more than that. It is erroneously apprehending the way that something exists.
Tanganzu pen do sound down the Nanzula yaji and a chu kandaji nangwa in a yang. Nanzuta Chuntala Majang recovery. Tavala Majang recovery. How do the chigi nilu tenlaya? Loga Masha recovery, Nanzula yaji. The kandaji nangwa in a yang. You can't top GP Yosulji Mato. Then the two singing key and Chana so I need never was. So I need never was.
So we're looking at the mode of appearance of phenomena that appear to us. So there's a certain way that phenomena appear to us. And there is that phase, that stage in which you haven't trained in a certain philosophical system, in a certain tenet. You haven't got a certain philosophical view. You haven't turned away, you haven't turned your mind, to look at a particular tenet or philosophical view. And you make that assumption that things exist in a way that they appear to you. And so in that sense, kind of, you make that assumption that whatever appears to you exists in that way. Right? So you, at that point, you certainly don't see dependency or relationships with whatever appears to you. So we're speaking about ignorance, right? So if we want to really cut to the chase and put it in a nutshell, this ignorance, what ignorance is grasping at things to exist in the way they appear to us.
Any mandri bajita, any samban shinji, mandru de yuji madove, Tadaji Tugumadas, that Tugumadas ra, and Kandaji Piglia, Suzulia, can now di Shizong patching drawn the Kasurda patching two on the Zambala, any Tanji, any Susul, now Nanshinji, the Mayon de yuji mado, Chilimadas, that are.
So ignorance, in a nutshell, is grasping at things to exist in a way that they appear to us. So we make that assumption that things do exist in a way they appear to us, and we follow that. Right? So we follow that, we take actions, we try to accomplish a particular thing in making the assumption that things exist in a way that they appear to us. So we pursue something, and at the end we get at a particular thing, but because our assumption, our initial assumption was that things exist in a way they appear to us, whatever we find that whatever we pursue was not really what we thought it would be. So when we find that it's not really what we thought it would be, it is a result of thinking that things exist in a way that they appear.
Shivana Penanganza Desadoji Bana and Tambo Tong Kimdo Kaushu, Giobati, Namadi, shizong pa desabdun deri ongi kansam jilaya tanji sama nanshinji zawin legmudo tangazo ra ani legmudo kochi ani madi gyodoji mandri gyosoraji ra tambo na ondi pe ani devu da kiwushu ji chordeya nang de shizongi ani yukhoran dini ani the yungumudos the nanshin pe na khala yanandra ji dulo yanandra ni ji pi ta ji chobo chomo yanandra tambo pi gya na nanshin gi pa tu ni ji on de tsambala zawni ni de yungumudos ti na nanshin ji yungumudos ta ra.
And we can look at examples of that in a variety of ways. If you look at that in a coarse way, if you look at that in a simple way, like for example, there is a certain seat that appears to you to be so comfortable, right? So you chase after that seat, that comfortable place to sit, and you sit down, but after a while, it is not as comfortable as it seemed to you initially. It's not that you can remain in that posture sitting on that particular thing forever. You have to change it. It's no longer something that is comfortable. And a similar thing happens with the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, the friends that we have. We make an assumption that they exist in a way that they appear to us, but they don't.
The dig carton was now that my true seg. Ginzendi.
So the logic or the reason that we are following here is related to things do not exist and not existing in the way they appear to us. And if things had things existed in the way they appeared to us, it would have meant that when you look for them to see if they exist objectively in the object itself, you would have been able to find them. But you can't find them if you look for them. If you check if they exist objectively, you cannot find them.
The Maribigi, now the Travanzim below Sanandra, Maribigi, Lotisananda, Digi, Yuki, Nilu, Mumalaya, Shinjulo, the Shuyabadi, the river Titonda, drip chocolates.
So this whole discussion is related to ignorance. And we said that in short, what we mean when we refer to ignorance is that apprehension of things as if they exist in the way they appear to us. So when you look deeper into that sense of ignorance, you can certainly become clear. You can certainly prove to yourself that ignorance is in error. It is erroneous with respect to reality. Things do not exist in that way.
Things that any Mariba Digan, Zimbatar, Tana Nigmeza, that Zindan Shinjulo said Chagores, Lo Shinjulo said Chagores.
So therefore, since in reality, phenomena do not exist in the way they appear to ignorance, the way that ignorance adheres to them or apprehends them is erroneous.
Dinza, that Dinti Lo Shinjulo di, Tangan Chadan Samala Jarmuaji, that Dinti Lo Shinjulo di, any never say your ways, Lavina, Tig, any Tidan Gabi Logic, Tig Kogi Kasota, Marie Pig, Zindan and Gabi, Lo Shinjiki Tony, any Marie was Sigi over the Sivuchai words,
So now when we look at consciousnesses such as ignorance, which are erroneous in the way that they apprehend their objects, in that they assume that phenomena exist in the way that they appear, and they also grasp at them to exist in the way that they appear, you come to see that this mode of apprehension is in error because phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear. So can those erroneous consciousnesses be eliminated. I mean, let alone anger and ignorance, particularly what we're here looking at is ignorance. So can it be eliminated? In order to investigate whether consciousnesses like that can be eliminated, what you need to check is whether it is possible to develop another consciousness that is contrary to them in their mode of apprehension. If you can develop another consciousness that is contrary to ignorance in its mode of apprehension, you'd be able to eliminate ignorance.
다 컨텐츠 세우 차그레스 라운디 다 마리와 디기 유기 내루라야 아니 가서다 냠가친 신줄로든 진데게 여바디 아니 통운디 잠발다 유기 내루디 큰 잠바다 디 유기 내루 마임바 유기 내루 현지 여바디 디톤다 주초도다 유기 내루 통미 로디 온디기 내루라 신줄로도 시비 로디 마냠로야디 다디 고충이 차고라서
So it becomes clear that you can eliminate ignorance in that you start to look at ignorance and you see that ignorance has a particular manner of apprehending its object. And this manner of apprehending its object, this mode of apprehension, is not in line with reality. It is not correct. It is mistaken. So when you understand how it is mistaken, you cause it to deteriorate, or you cause the destruction of ignorance, because it's not, once you see how ignorance is mistaken, it cannot remain in the way that it is.
라다 넬룩 현지여 인자 넬룩 디 마리 비긴 진단 디 유기 넬룩 마임바 유기 넬룩 디 텔레 현지여 바 인자 텔레 현지여 바 인자 텐통 로 여바디야 아니 율 여비토지 텐통 로 여바디 고 리비트 바라와스라.
Which means that you're looking at the object of ignorance, and you come to see that the reality of the object of ignorance is not as ignorance make it to be. It's different to what ignorance makes it to be. There's another way of existence of that object. There's another reality of that object.
제 딘자 디로 여인자 다 나랑 소다오지기 배 마리비 숙침부 드딩이 배 나타오지기 이마이나야 유긴네루 초와이나 유긴네루 여와인자 아니 나로지 초와이나야 손이 니투바디 딱 고충이 자고레스 유 칸다지 여비추 칸다지네야 아니 제니 비길이야 아니 따지 제니 니바니 니투바디
And this is something that we can see through our investigation. So we're so obscured by ignorance. At least Geshe said that he's so obscured by ignorance. But then still, he can sense how, if you look into how ignorance makes its object be, right? What it makes up of its object, and how in an actual fact, there is another mode of existence of that object. There's another reality to that object. You can certainly, through that investigation, reach a certain conclusion. You can certainly come to ascertain that.
아니 슈촌드야디 대한코 아니 간당 톤 로 배는 지 차단 따오기 간디기 톤이 그 뒤층이 작어라서 지기 슈치오니 지쇼 냠드야디 배는 차와기 슈치나 아니 담무 슈자르 담무 슈치오니 차위 슈자르 난신기 전당가비 로디 아니 이게 비기 전당에 지오니 아니 신주로 슈기 로디기 슈마 냠드야디 그 춘이 작어레스.
So you can investigate that mode of existence of objects, their reality. And even if you don't, for the time being, generate a valid cognition with respect to the way that they are, with respect to their reality, you can still, by the power of your analysis and investigation, decrease the power of ignorance. You can reduce the power of ignorance through that mode of analysis. You look into it, you investigate it, and you come to see that there is a way that ignorance apprehends its object, but in reality, it doesn't exist like that. So you develop a consciousness that is contrary to ignorance. It is directly contradictory to ignorance. And when you increase that new consciousness that see the way that phenomena exist, which is in stark contradiction to ignorance, then ignorance diminishes. It's just like, for example, heat and cold being contrary to each other or opposite to each other. When you increase the heat, coolness will subside. Or if you increase that coolness, the heat factor will subside, will decrease. So it's like that also with developing another consciousness which is contrary to ignorance. If you develop a consciousness through analysis and investigation that understands that the way that ignorance apprehends its object is erroneous, then that consciousness that is contrary to ignorance would be able to cause the diminishment of ignorance.
아니 유기 내루라야 가주 제바 뒤쪽에 아니 내루게 내루디 추 세르용 거래스 세르죠 그래스 세르죠 뒤쪽에 내루 통이 로디 아니 슈체르죠라다 로 슈체르죠 그래스 내루 통이 로디 슈체르죠니 내루라 아니 신주로 슈댕이 로디 마냠죠 거다 두 시온디게 다 아니 제 내루 토픽 로 제당기 로 생이 디게 그 랑신디 가주스기 비례야 컴지 때는야 아니 컴바 타메든 조여와디 아니 셈치니를 소로 셈치니
And the more you investigate the mode of abidance of such objects, the clearer your mind becomes about with respect to how they exist, the mode of abidance, the way they are. This is the nature of such investigation to cause you to have a greater and greater clarity with respect to that mode of abidance. It's just like we say that apply that investigation in a way that is similar to the way that you would investigate a nugget of gold. So you can cut it, you can rub it, you can melt it in fire in order to make sure that that nugget of gold is an authentic or real piece of gold. In a similar way, you want to check whether that display of reality that appears to you is real or whether it is fabricated, it is unreal. So you investigate the mode of abidance of an object, and through that you get a clearer and clearer view of its reality, its mode of abidance. And when you have a clearer and clearer view of its mode of abidance, then the erroneous apprehension subsides, it diminishes. And this is the way we kind of, so we're speaking about kind of a mind that becomes clearer and clearer with respect to the mode of abidance, with respect to the way that things are, reality, which is actually in the nature of consciousness or awareness to be like that, in a sense that the nature of consciousness is such that you can increase the familiarity of the consciousness with a particular object in a limitless way. You can do that limitlessly because that's the nature of consciousness.
아니 공부슈치 레온디기 다 샘기 닐루라야 지비 로디 지비 로디 제마다 제바 안 세진 샘기 닐루 베게 용수 살데바치 다 차고레스 다 디엔자 다 간지 아니 다 뉴몬비 제마다 제바 베기라야 마리기 제마다 제바 아니 세바치 온도 키로 여바디 아니 유그 닐루 톱기다 주요레스.
So you increase your understanding of reality, the way that things are. And through that, when you look at what obscures you from seeing reality, those obscurations with respect to reality, through in the process of analysis and investigation of reality, you clear away your disdains that prevent you from seeing reality clearly, right? So there are currently things that obscure your vision of reality, and through that analysis and investigation, you can develop complete clarity so that those stains do no longer remain. So currently we are still obscured by afflictions and the stains of such afflictions, but they can be removed. They can be completely cleared away.
Tirda tinza and that digi togi any dunga gyu that marigwa chadamonsu di zawa marigwa tomata chiva sebi seba yona digi jebu ani chadang teletembi dunga sebi seba yobata karswata the lelabusur chagoras the rock.
So in this way, you can see how suffering has causes such as the causes are origins or common afflictions, anger, attachment, and ignorance. And through looking at the way that they operate, particularly looking at ignorance, you can come to see that there is a way of bringing about or enacting the complete elimination of anger and attachment and ignorance that are the causes of suffering. So there is a possibility of complete elimination of anger, attachment, and ignorance, and also the suffering that they bring about. It is similar to, let's say, a harvest or crops that could be cultivated. So if there is a certain harvest or crops, something that you can grow in your field, it depends upon causes. If you eliminate the causes, you will also eliminate the crops, the harvest, whatever could grow in your field, right? It is the nature of things to be like that if the causes are eliminated, the result will also not come about.
Tinzata ani karsota dunga gyoda cheba seyala dunga gyoda cheba ponya di ani yugi nilu tongyu tobki ro yugi nilu tongyu tobki ta ani sego doasta sego waras tinzata kanji ani dunga gyoda cheba ta tanji shiba na dunga gyoda cheba seba telaya ani goba segores.
You eliminate suffering together with the causes of suffering through seeing the reality of objects, seeing the way that objects exist. So here we're looking at the elimination of suffering together with its causes, elimination or exhaustion of suffering together with the causes, and this is what we call cessation, right? So cessation is the elimination of suffering and its causes.
Tere dinza karsawarta je ta goba slawan ta gobe kechu shidi ta jadang phanda chigba inaya ta 아니 피게 동할 당한 좀 문제기 또 동안자 동한 거 있잖아 거봐 동한 그 뉴몬 시위잖아 시와 어두스 센타고 그랬어 거봐들이야
So here we come to look at the third truth, which is true cessation, right? So here we're looking at cessations. Now, as we're also looking at the 16 aspects of the four truths, we're now going to look at the aspects of cessations. So as we spoke of cessation, we said that cessation referred to the elimination of suffering together with its causes, right? So of the four aspects of true cessation, the first one is cessation. What has been ceased are suffering together with its causes. The second aspect is peace. What has been pacified, or no, the second aspect could be pacification or peace. What has been pacified are suffering together with its causes.
제 아니 시와 세다 뉴몬 시위잖아 센타야디 뉴몬 시위잖아 아니 시와스 대딩원이 지금 시대세디야 아 뉴몬 비세메나 sem maron adi mena ani semle da shide yobati da siushura ra nanju chi chagdangi samlo di khazu yobati chogi ani sem di nanola ya chi mansang gyosuru chi ra pena nanju ta chi ani dewa nyonsula mambore ta chi chagbi dewa tuzo zawi gi semle ya dewa chi yungu yana ya 디다 냠도 지 아니 당에 삼나 지 셈라에 마강한 교수를 지 내가 마침 비기 남바지 딘디지 딘디지 요레스타
In a more specific sense, when you look at the second aspect of cessation, and the second aspect is pacification or peace, it refers to pacification of the afflictions. The second aspect gets the name peace or pacification due to having pacified the afflictions. So think about how without pacifying afflictive states of mind, there would be no peace and well-being. Currently, a mind is together with afflictive states of mind, and therefore a mind does not find peace and well-being. And if you think of how it would be like to have no afflictive states in your mind stream, then your mind would be peaceful. It would be a happy mind. So when we look at currently their state of mind, we can recognize how a mind is together with anger and attachment. Not only that, with stronger form of anger and attachment. And in that sense, there is something, always something that is incomplete in our mind. Like, for example, when you think of attachment, right? So there is a pleasure that is derived from attachment. You are attached to a particular thing, you get what your attachment seeks, and there is some happiness or pleasure that you get from that. But still, in Geshe's mind, when he looks at the experience that you get through attachment, you can see that even though there is some pleasure, there is some happiness, there's still something that is incomplete in that what you were wishing for, what you were looking for is not satisfied.
간지 셈야 데바 마칸 바스고다 마sam바지 간지 셈 망엄 바스그라 페나간주 카콤용디 카슈 주콤온디 추동도 그 삼바 다 슈침을 내고라 디 깔래야 페나 차추소로 동바이나 차추 동바이나 칼롬바도 차고르다 이네야 디게 ngomgumun dasda ro dinang shingi ani benada chi saji dewa ta chagbi dewa thoni ani nganju semdi ngomgumares ro di ta mangoba di ta mangoba insa ani shide dio mares ro
Right? So we're not satisfied. We're not satiated. There is no, it is not enough. This is what we mean by saying that when you look at the pleasure that you do derive from attachment, there's still something that is missing, that is incomplete. It is not totally satisfying. So when we say that it's not totally satisfying, you can look at a certain analogy. Like, for example, you're thirsty and you want to drink some water, but what you get is salty water. So you do have that wet sensation in your mouth, but because it is salty water, it's still not satisfying. So this is what you get when you use contaminated happiness or pleasure that comes out of attachment. It gives you some pleasure, and yet it is not satisfying. It is not completely satisfying.
Tinzada mimu yung seondi rangyugi chadang mongsongi ra mimu yung seondi ta ngondi gi shideti ra sempakpebo ani shideti ta tudu yungu yosarawas ra.
So then think of this option of completely eliminating your afflictions. The mind being totally without anger, attachment, and ignorance. How you have then real peace. The mind will be totally at ease if your afflictions, anger, attachment, and so forth would be completely pacified.
Ta diri di kable ta dini kya nomba set ta ngonne chani ki ta chik ene pemba seti ta yungo rasara.
And at this point, when you get to the point where you have pacified them, it will be a bountiful state. Bountiful here, meaning that from that you will have benefit and bliss.
Ter dinza ta shiva di ene nginjons lara ta zawa nini dine ene nyumba ta nyimbi to ki chom har zawa nini ta ene jongye mebe chanta ene ngebar jongwa seti.
Karemajong?
Larya har kia mebe chan.
So the third aspect is bountiful, right? So bountiful in that having pacified these afflictions, you'll have benefit and bliss. And the fourth aspect is the aspect of emergence. You have emerged from those states, from afflictions and so forth, to the point in which they will not occur again. All right, since they will not occur again, you've emerged from them. This is the fourth aspect of emergence.
Tirda dindi telaya goba sigiyore, tarba sigiyore, ani da shidesena digora desegores. Da dindi chig yoba yinza ta nganzu laya ngebar to goya ge ani chig chuyo nobody dichago yanza ta telaya kandas drogore rochi. Ra midamazn ta kandas drog nga drogi islavena kera lamgan dinin drogore segi lamda masonna ani chedi ani ta lamden sedi lamden di ta en tu shiva lamden temba di ra tharwa dribi lamla ya ani lamden sedi legores.
So this is what we call cessation, right? So we spoke of the four aspects of cessation, which is also called liberation. So that exists. That cessation, that liberation is something that is in existence. So if it exists and it is like this precious gem, you might wonder, how do I get there? How do I get to that state of liberation? Well, there is a path that leads to that state of liberation. And this is what we look at when we look at the fourth truth, which is true paths.
Reda ta lam di khare islam ta lam zo di tharwa dribi lam zo di ani chön namgi nelu dameba onsum tobi yishi di 아니 타와드비 람기다 심하드레스 비 람친드레스 라.
So then, in looking at the fourth truth, true paths, the main true path is a perceptual realization of selflessness. This is the principle. This is the main true path, a perceptual realization of selflessness.
레다 디 칸디지 조 체그레스 베는 남기는 간주 베디 아니 야슈디 자치슈디 인지다 잔주 샘다 지 송구도 디 아니 타와 트리비 람조디 디소 마용이야 안 다음에 뭔가숨도 이시디 조 칸디지 진 차르세라서 다 가리는 다 더버 용초라서라.
So you might wonder, how is it possible that a perceptual realization of selflessness is the main true path? It is the main path. It is the principal one. After all, we speak so much of compassion and the mind of enlightenment and how valuable they are. You know, we appreciate them to be so valuable, and still they do not become the principal true path. The main one, the principal true path, is a perceptual realization of selflessness. So we need to understand that point, in what way it constitutes the principal path.
디 카르레스 라운디 타바 토발라 파르트 중인게 고긴 진인 조디 뉴무 투섬 셰마도 셴바수칸 요마르와스 라 미시엔지 님조와 시엔지기 직자라 시엔지기 엔지 르다 출로서 강기자 먼저 타바 토발라 파르트 쪽이요 마르스 타바 토발라 파르트 중인 조디 차당 몬성인자 차당 몬성기 다 조비 마리 버차게엔자 마리 바 토니에스나문도 마리 비자와데 제보 공이 조디 다음에 원고선 또 이시 디코나리마도 젠수 강기자 아니 제무투 또무퉁이 진바자 다음에 또 이시디 조 디니 차와레스.
In order to understand that, we need to look at the factors that prevent us from attaining the state of liberation. The conditions that prevent us from attaining the state of liberation are the three poisonous afflictions: anger, attachment, and ignorance. These are the things that prevent our own liberation. There's nothing that can obliterate anger, attachment, and ignorance. There's nothing that can stop them other than a perceptual realization of selflessness. No other person, no other thing, no mountains, no rivers, and so forth. Nothing else can eliminate, obliterate ignorance other than a perceptual realization of selflessness. So we speak of the three poisonous afflictions: anger, attachment, and ignorance. And of these three, the main one, the principle, is ignorance. Nothing can destroy, nothing can uproot ignorance other than wisdom that realizes selflessness.
레다 가진 제 두고 말스 라바이나 다가랑 레다 코단 진당 우승가 코단 빼디 딱딱 빼 아니 감가 영이지 아니 로직이 토네 아니 콜라야 진 탐고르마다 아니 코단 튠비기 로지고 코단 딱딱하게 감가 마인 바지기 아니 코단 진 투고 말았더라.
And the only thing that can destroy, that can cut through our ignorance, is wisdom that realizes selflessness, because it is directly contradictory to ignorance. If you use something else, another type of consciousness that agrees with ignorance, that is compatible with ignorance, it's not quite contradictory to ignorance, not in a direct way. You're not going to be able to cut through ignorance. The only way to do that would be to use a consciousness that is directly contrary to ignorance.
딘자 코다 무슨 가딩이 전당 무슨 가딩이 로디 다음에 왔다 이시모도 요마르스 잠바든 인지도 잔주 샘로 소바디 전당 무슨 망가 인자 아니 무슨 본이고 말소라 잠소 몬당 가메시 신드니에 받쳐주면서
An exalted wisdom that realizes selflessness is directly contradictory to the mode of apprehension of ignorance, and therefore it is the only thing that can cut through ignorance. Love, compassion, the mind of enlightenment are not contradictory in the mode of apprehension to ignorance. So just as one text says, it doesn't matter how much you have cultivated them, they will not be able to eliminate ignorance. Without the viewer realizing the way things are, you will not be able to cut through ignorance, because in order to cut through ignorance, you need another consciousness that is directly contradictory in its mode of apprehension.
Lam den segorius. Lam. Tower reveal any laming channel lam. Any lam ripa tripa ninjins laura. Any semki chungi nelu any yonsu trivichani. Any ripa down. Any this laguarata lam ripa tripa ninjas.
So then, a true path, the main true path, the principal one, is wisdom that realizes selflessness. So in relation to that true path of exalted wisdom that realizes selflessness, there are four aspects. The first aspect is path, in that wisdom, exalted wisdom that realizes selflessness is the path that leads to liberation. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is cognition or knowledge. So cognition or knowledge is the knowledge of reality, the way things are. Right? That's the second aspect. It knows reality, it knows the way that things are. No. So then these aspects are the four aspects are path, cognition, establishment, and definite release. Definite release sometimes is called, I think, deliverance.
Lasso that de la shai sra ansani chedan lamki jemadilaya ani so da lam lavasum re lam ngasum chonga re into so tanyenti and this chick motor chevana time manche de singa de missing is this pentogras ra.
So we've covered quite a bit today, and Geshe wants to maybe leave it here for now. What we will do in the next meeting is to look more closely at the path that we put into practice. So we sometimes speak of the parts of the three trainings. So the 5 parts, the 3 vehicles, the 5 parts all coming together to 15 parts. So there are quite a few terms that we use in those teachings, and many of them are explained when we look at the 3 trainings, the system of the 5 parts. So Geshe wanted maybe to unpack this topic so that we'll acquire the terms, the terminology, and also the understanding of those terms so that we'll be able to use them later on.
Thank you.
So thank you. We'll leave it here for now. So I'm just going to remind you guys that we have also a session tomorrow morning at 10:30. Geshe will continue with his teaching on the steps of the path to enlightenment. And on Saturday and Sundays, Honest the Dalai Lama is giving teachings online, broadcasted worldwide. So I think that it's going to be at 12:30 Yudla time, so which is the center of the world, center of the universe. So if you would like to find some more details, then you can go online to www.dalailama.com and join in. So thank you very much. I'll put the prayers on the screen.
Rinpoche Maki Panam Ki Gyurchi Kyawa Nyamba Meba Onye Gondu Bewara Shu
Nyutoda lama sangye dugyone dowa chikya malupa ke salango parasho kowe shinkansu pendan dewa malu juwe ni chinre siwan tenzi yazo shabe sinte bardu tenguru chi chamji jangun jawe tenzin kyombe we gutso Chosung gore le man puyu Anta so du shi kon tu sha de shu.
Thank you. Good night. See you next week. Thank you.
Sorry? Yeah, I'll switch it off. Sorry? Kirsty, I don't know which Kirsty. I hope that it's the right Kirsty.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and not the wrong Kirsty. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Bye.
Is it only Lindsay? Yeah. Cool.
Hi.
Leonie.
Hi. Bye.
Hey.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Hey, Pam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.